All right. Hey, all you cool cats and kittens. This is now week 65 of quarantine. Um, I'm going stir crazy inside this apartment. Uh, I don't know what day it is anymore. I don't know what I ate for dinner tonight. I don't even know how I got a haircut. But yet here we are. Um, and here we are. World History B. I know that. I know it's that time. All right. So at least I'm not that crazy. And I do know that we are on a very sad topic today and this week, and that topic's going to be imperialism. Okay. So I'm going to try and fly through this one. Um, Hopefully this video can be done in less than 10-15 minutes. Uh, let's not beat around the bush. I have a couple housekeeping things that we got to talk about, and that's just going to be getting your work in. Okay. I'm not sure. Um, I'm not sure how everybody's doing, but I did go through last week and put some grades in, and I do see a lot of zeros. Just make sure we keep getting things in. I know it's not fun. I know you're not having a good time. I'm not having a good time doing this, but at least like we're continuing with our school spirit. We're continuing with our school pride, and we're sticking with um, our quarantine goodness. Other than those people who are liberating, right? Across Michigan. I think Indiana. They went to the governor's mansion. Ohio. Um, just stay safe, okay? COVID-19 is still out there. Uh, it's still spreadable, very spreadable. It's contagious as heck. So be smart, okay? Be smart. Know what you're doing, and that's all I can ask for. So let's get into imperialism, okay? Imperialism is going to sound a lot like colonization, but it's very different. Okay, so colonization is kind of like the early times. They're exploring, they're finding territory, they're claiming territory. Yes, they're killing people. Yes, they're taking their goods, but it's not seen like that. It's seen as a mutual connection. Okay, they're trying to better that area. They're trying to create better area or better trade with people and whatnot. Imperialism is different. Okay, imperialism is strictly a win-win for Europeans. Okay, uh, the Europeans are going mostly into Africa, and they are taking all of their resources, stripping the Africans of everything that they have for their own good. Okay, for Europe's own good because of what we talked about last week, that industrial revolution. Okay, when you get factories and you get mass goods like that being created, you need the resources. And where do they find those resources? I feel bad saying this, and it has to be said, but they wanted to go to the place in which they thought was inferior, and that place was Africa because they were Africans living there, the blacks. And what we didn't get to talk about last week was this new mindset, this new creation called social Darwinism. Okay, if you've heard of Charles Darwin is the founder of evolution. Okay, so they took that evolution founding or theory and they put that onto humans. Okay, so social Darwinism is a very racist ideology in which they believe that blacks aren't equal to whites, and they look at their craniums and they look at their work ethic and how they're supposed to be out in the sun, and that's social Darwinism, and it's racism at its core, and uh, that's something that you have to get used to, and it's been going on and on, but this is them saying putting scientific terms to racism. Okay, it's not scientific at all, just racist. Okay, so a lot of imperialism is going to be a blemish for the Europeans, um, but hey, they made a lot of money and their factories were working well. So capitalism. All right, let's get into it. So, some motives for colonization or for imperialism was, like I said, the Industrial Revolution. You need markets to send your goods, and then you also need resources and raw materials. So, Africa is the hotbed. Next, a huge one, which is also going to lead to World War One. All of this imperialism, and we'll get into Maine next week. Maine meaning militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism. All four of these things are literally the oily rag that creates World War One. But the next one, nationalism. Okay, at this time, you are not a real country unless you have foreign territory. Okay, so if you look at Britain, Britain is a huge nation, okay, because they have territory in Europe, and then they also have territory everywhere, okay. They've given up a lot of their territory, but then they go right into Africa and take more of Africa. Germany, a real nation because they have real territory outside of Europe. Then you look at like Spain. Spain's not really a real country at this point. Okay, why? No territory. They don't got much territory outside of their four walls in the Iberian Peninsula. Okay, so nationalism is huge. Okay, if you're not conquering land outside of Europe, then you're not anything to them. Okay, again, this is what drives towards your World War One. Okay, not only do you have land here, but you also have land here, here, and here. And when this one goes to war, this one, and this one also goes to war. So that's why it's World War. Okay. Next, there are missionary activities going on. So yes, Christianity is being spread. They want another motive is going to be naval bases, yada yada yada. A weird one, but important one to know is they use some of these territories to send people they didn't want. So you have a prisoner here, you have a bad guy here, move him out of Britain and take him somewhere else. I'm speaking specifically about Australia. Okay, Australia is a penal canal, which just means it's a prison colony. Down here, it's the perfect prison colony because it's a freaking island. You can't leave. So once you steal bread here, they're like, we don't want you anymore. Ship you all the way down to here where you're stuck for the rest of your life and you'll build a family down there. Okay, it's not like prison where they throw you into or behind bars. They just say, hey, build a life in Africa or in Australia. Good luck. Here's a couple bucks. All right, that's Australia, and that's another motive to send people they didn't want. Another huge one is social and economic opportunities. You have humanitarian reasons. A couple of those. Not many of those that are being seen. And then the last one is just European racism, okay? So yes, I talked about social Darwinism, but another one is called The White Man's Burden, okay? And it's a poem, I think by like Rudyard Kipling, which is not familiar because it's the Jungle Book. And his white man's burden is this idea that Africans are children, okay? They're children, they're naive, and they need a white man to lead them towards God. Okay, so they just don't get it. So us white men need to go through and fix everything, right? It's just mansplaining at its finest, and it's just a way to assimilate everybody and prove that white men are number one, right? We all know it's not true, but again, hindsight's 2020. That's what they did back then. Blemish across the board. All right, so those are your motives for imperialism. You also have to think about when it starts. It really starts around the 60s and 70s of the 1800s, so right after the Industrial Revolution really booms, okay? So what's funny is before the 1850s, Africa is not much known. So like you have Africa. Here's Africa, right? It's like this right here, okay? And the only areas that are known by like 1810 are the coasts. Why, you ask? Oh, because that's the only place they need to know. Okay, the slaves are coming out to them, which the slave trade ends in 1840 in Britain. So once that ends, they're like, whoa, let's get resources. And where are the resources? Inside. So you got to go inside those walls, those borders. So yeah. Once the slave trade ends, they're kind of like, well, we don't need the coast anymore. Let's go inside and see what's in here. Before that, they were afraid of malaria. Then there was already civilizations in there, like the Zulus and the Tswana people. There's a lot of people already in there. So they just stayed on the coast. It's not until you have the finding of gold and rubber and diamonds where they push inside and try and take more land. You have people like Dr. David Livingstone, who are those first missionaries, those first expeditionaries who go inside of Africa and really claim land, or not claim land, but kind of just like plot the land out so the European countries kind of knew what they were dealing with. They were following along the rivers. They would follow the Congo River, the Nile River, just to see how far it went. Um, and then Dr. Livingston's actually going to stay in Africa, and then they'll bring another expedition led by Henry Stanley, and his main goal is to find Dr. Livingston, and he does. The first thing he says to Dr. Livingston is, "Dr. Livingston, I presume," and then that will start this huge thing. And Henry Stanley is this important finder, and yeah. So they finally go inside Africa. Once they do that, they bring this back to Europe, and you'll have people like King Leopold II, who like sees the opportunity immediately, and he'll go and literally buy the Congo Free State for himself. Okay, so you can say that the Belgians owned the Congo, but really it was actually King Leopold's own. It was his own real estate. So all the money went directly to King Leopold and didn't go to the Belgians at all. So you can blame the Belgians for how, I'm going to be frank, how shitty they treated the Belgian or the Congolese. But really it was specifically King Leopold, and it's not until his death in the night, or not death, but his late life and death, where the Congo was actually transferred over to Belgian territory. All right, and I'm not going to talk too much about Congo and King Leopold and black gold and rubber, because I want you to look it up yourself. Okay, it's on the PowerPoint that I've given you, and it's some sad stuff. All right, the way that they're treated is just unfair, brutal, it's gross. So I want you to look it up yourself, because me throwing numbers at you is not going to do you justice. Okay, me saying how many people lost limbs while working for King Leopold and punishing his lazy workers. All right, like I can say the number: 5 to 8 million people were affected by the rubber trade that came out of the Congo Free State. You say Free State, but really it's not Free State. So yeah, I'm kind of just blabbering right now because I love this topic, but it's a love in a sense that like we have this mindset about Africa that it's this continent that's so far behind, but it's not their fault. All right, so there are no countries before 1870. Okay, there's no countries before 1914. There's just people there. All right, there's no borders. Like yeah, there's rivalries, and the Zulus don't like the Tswanas and whatever, but it's not until Europe comes in and really f's it all up that we have the 54 countries and massive borders and gross countries, like geographic formed countries that we have today. All right, like Africa gets a terrible rep, but it's you can blame almost all of it on Europe and the wrongdoings of the imperialism. So really sucks. All right, so I'm gonna get off the rant there. Please tomorrow, really dig deep into King Leopold. It'll be one of the questions for sure. All right, so after King Leopold, you also have people down south in the Boer territory, which is South Africa. All right, the Boers are Dutch descent. They get there in the 1600s and they live there, and they're Afrikaners, but it's Africa with a K and double A at the end. All right, because they're Africans, but they're different because they're white. All right, so then you get the Boer War with Britain because the Boers don't like British, and the British take over during this time period. And yeah, look it up if you want to. The Boer War. It's all because of diamonds being found in the Transvaal in the Orange State. Moving on. All right, you'll get the big thing that we need to talk about, and I'll talk about for a couple minutes, and then probably wrap this one up. All right, and that's the Scramble for Africa. Okay, the Scramble for Africa starts in about 1886, 1884, and all it is the Berlin Conference. And so the Berlin Conference is this conference in which kings and magistrates came to Berlin, and they put a map of Africa on the board, and then they just said what area they want. So like Britain walks up and says, "Hey, I want Egypt." That's British territory, and the French and the Germans and the Italians like, okay, that's their territory. Check off. Can't get that one. And then the the Germans walk up and say, I want the Cameroon, and they go, that's Cameroon. That's going to be German territory. All right. So you ask how this happened, and you ask who was in attendance, and you're like, hey, which African people were there? None. There were no African people there. Okay. This is a faulty system in which they claimed land of area that wasn't theirs, and they just waltzed right in, and said, gave them stupid contracts that they couldn't read, and just made them sign. Um, so that's the scramble for Africa, and that really starts in about 1886, and that'll go all the way until World War One. Okay, 1914. Right? Like I said, imperialism is one of those major things that really oiled up this rag that was Europe and was just waiting for a spark. And we'll get into that spark next week, which is the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. All right. So that's imperialism. I could go into a lot more depth. It's a very sad moment. It's a huge blemish in history for the wrongdoings that were done to the African people. I say only Africans, but it's not just Africa. Okay, like the U.S. don't get any African territories, but they'll be a part of imperialism. It's just they start later. Like their first imperialistic state or territory that they take is in 1897, and that's because they take the Spanish colonies of or imperialistic areas of Guam, the Philippines, Cuba. All right, the Spanish-American War. Like that's America's first taste of imperialism. All right. So really this first part that we're talking about is European. Okay, it's almost all European, and the big reference is Africa. Okay, yes, there's stuff going on in Asia. Okay, spheres of influence all throughout Asia. You have Japan getting involved, and Japan will come out as a real player coming out of this. All right, they'll get into the Russo-Japanese War because Russia's like, hey, let's go pick on those Japanese, and then the Russians will lose it, and the people are like, whoa, Japan is someone who will not be messed with. Okay, and we'll see that come World War One, and immediately after in World War Two in 1939, right? Like 41, we have Pearl Harbor. They took out an entire naval fleet, right? So there's some real players that come out of imperialism. Terrible time, a lot of death, but if you look fast forward 20, 30 years to 1914, and you'll see those players again, because that's what this all started. Imperialism leads right to nationalism, and then with nationalism you find common allies, and that's alliances. And once you get alliances in this nationalism, you got to build your military. All right, and we'll get into that all next week. So imperialism is a major step forward and a major push towards World War One. Okay, if you have any questions, please let me know. Like I said, I tried doing this really quickly. This is 18 minutes in. I feel like I'm getting better at this whole e-learning thing, which just makes me almost want to throw up my mouth saying out loud. Please email me questions. Tomorrow's assignment is going to be pretty simple. I'm not going to make you draw. Sadly, that was a failed attempt because I've only gotten like 15 of those. So keep getting those things in. All right. I miss you all. It's getting tough, but I'll be busy the next couple days. Fingers crossed. I think I bought a house. So yeah. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Go hot dogs. I'll see you next week. Or if you want to Zoom me.